I'm really excited to speak with you today because I've heard of IQ,
Yes.
EQ, emotional intelligence, but I've never heard about heart Q. So I'm so ready to pick your brain, and I have 1,000 questions for you because I think it's a very interesting and obvious concept, but a lot of people don't talk
Mm,
about it too much. So I'm ready to dive in. But before we do, I want to
yeah.
find out more about you, though. I want to hear more about your journey,
hmm
how you became a heart intelligence coach.
Yeah. Well, my journey, like everybody else's, starts when, I would say in childhood, growing up, because that's where all the foundation of our life starts, right? So just briefly, I grew up in an environment that from the outside sounds and looks like amazing, right? My dad was an ambassador, he's a diplomat, so I got to travel with him wherever he went, wherever he was stationed. Lived in that kind of diplomatic environment, different cultures, things like that, right? And everything looked amazing. I got exposed to different people, different ways of life, different ways of thinking. On the inside, though, that's where most of the formation was happening. Because being a diplomatic environment, there was a lot of protocols, a
Mm,
lot of rules that had to be followed very, very strictly, right? My dad used to say to me that remember, all your actions are scrutinized. Everything from your body language, your posture, the way that you speak, your words, everything is being scrutinized, and
mm,
that reflects on your country, right?
mm.
So to me, as you can imagine, that was very confusing,
Yeah.
as a 3-year-old. So imagine being a
Wow.
3-year-old being told that you cannot do this and you have to do this thing, right?
Yeah.
So what I now understand that I did back then as a kid, I would leave myself, right? I would
Mm,
leave myself and I would go into my mind. I would have all these emotions, but I never felt safe to feel them. I never
mm.
felt safe to express them, and it really felt constraining. It's almost like they drew a little box around me and said, "You
Yeah.
have to stay in this box." Of course, because if you don't, then there's not just it looks bad, but it's also potential punishment, right? So
Yes.
it was all of that. So then I would go to my mind and almost like in a freeze, right? I would
Mm,
freeze and just go into my mind and start strategizing. What would be the right thing to do right now? What would be the right thing to say right now? How can I impress the other person, right? So imagine doing this for pretty much my entire life. As long as I got to travel with my dad, I got conditioned
mm-hmm.
to first of all not be in touch with myself, like not be in touch with what do I actually feel right now, not be in touch with what do I actually want right now, like what are my needs, what are my wants, right? Always I was conditioned to always think about like how what would the other person want me to say, how can I show up in a way that I'm being accepted,
Mm-hmm.
you know so all of these things, all of these life experiences, so to speak, kind of shaped me in a way where I silenced all the way to a whisper,
Mm.
my own voice, my own authenticity, my own intuition. Now, I say to a whisper because luckily it was still there and it kept
Yeah.
whispering, to me. And then at the right time, later on in life, things started happening about 10 years ago, I would say. That's kind of when my personal development, well, I call it more of like a personal expansion journey,
Mm-hmm.
started. And that voice started to become louder and louder and louder until now. I'm a lot more in tune, let's just say, with myself, and yeah, a lot more connected to myself and to my heart.
Yes. It's so interesting that you talk about losing yourself by trying to please other people.
Mhm.
And, with the act of people pleasing, because I struggled with that as well. Um, you really do lose yourself because you're not living your life for yourself, you're living your life for others. So you're constantly making decisions that you think other people want you to make, and
Mhm.
once you start doing that, you don't even know what decisions are right for you or what path you should go down, and you're confused, and you definitely feel disconnected from yourself and from your heart. So I want to know, how did you realize, like, through your journey,
Mhm.
because obviously now you're a heart intelligence coach,
Mhm.
how did you realize that it all tied back to really connecting with your heart, right? Like tapping into your intuition, understanding, your own path, and being having the courage to make the decisions that are that align with you. How did you realize like it was all connected to the heart?
Yeah, that's a great question, because a lot of times I joke, why is it not connected to the liver, right? Why is it not the spleen? Why is it not the big toe or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's the heart. Why is that? Well, I would say that the heart has, even throughout our evolution,
Mm-hmm.
has always proven itself to be. I feel like this has been almost like a lost art,
Yeah.
or a lost knowledge, but the heart has always been what we even unconsciously point to when we refer to ourselves, to our true
Mm-hmm.
selves, right? When we are confused, let's say we're talking to someone and we are confused about who they're talking to. What do
Mm-hmm.
we say? Oh, are you talking about me? We always point to ourselves, to our
Mm-hmm.
heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we say, oh, let's say we feel connect to our heart when we feel in flow with ourselves, right? What do we point to? We say, oh, it feels so good, right? So the heart, besides this almost like an evolutionary endpoint to who we truly are, right? The heart is also an organ. Besides being an organ, right, it's also an energetic organ, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the heart does emit its own, first of all, it has 40,000 neurons, like just like the
Wow.
brain, right? 40,000
Mm-hmm.
neurons, and it does have its own energetic field, right? So in my journey of self-discovery and self-expansion, I found that I was always coming back to, when I was talking about, feeling more of me, becoming more of me, always coming back to my heart. So I started becoming more intentional about that and say, just kind of like a kid playing with it, like, oh, okay, this is interesting. Let me play more with this. And I started, playing with making decisions, for example, decisions from the mind
Mm-hmm.
versus decisions made from the heart. Decisions from the mind are usually decisions such as, I mean, the way that they play out, for example, is that we create pros and cons, making all sorts of lists, all of those things, right? What I found in my experience, and I do believe that this is most people do the same thing, is that when we make decisions from our mind with the pros and cons and all sorts of lists, and what is a good thing, what is a bad thing, what is a right thing, what is a wrong thing, first of all, there's a lot of expenditure of energy, right? We expend so much energy going through that process. Making the decision is always so hard. Oh God, oh God, oh God. And then finally we make the decision. Once we've made the decision, we're happy for one fraction of a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens is that we tend to look over our shoulder and doubt and say, did I make the right decision? Did I take everything in that I could have into account, right? This is a decision made with the mind. Now, a
Mm-hmm.
decision made with the heart is one where it's almost like direct knowledge. It's a feeling that you just know instantaneously. And I've made so many decisions in my life since I become more intentional, from the place of my heart, where my mind if my mind's voice was saying, "Are you crazy? Why would you be doing this? It makes no sense." This is my internal voice. I also had voices from outside, family members or friends, acquaintances saying, why would you do that? That decision is not aligned with whatever you said you were going to do and all these things, right? And I could not explain to them. I just said, I can't tell you exactly why. It just feels right. I know it in my heart that this is the right decision. And every time I made that decision, those kind of decisions, I would never, this is just my own observation about myself, looking back at myself. I never once looked back over my shoulder to doubt, did I make the right decision? It always turned, looking back, I always saw the thread of like, me making that decision brought me to this situation, which is absolutely amazing right now. And it took no energy. It just flowed. So to me, when I started living more intentionally from the heart, as I say, I've noticed that my life also started to change. I made decisions much more easier. Things happened in my life that started manifesting things a lot easier. I started attracting the right people, right? And I do feel that the reason, if I was to take it even one step behind, right? Why is that? What's behind that? Well, it's simply because I started becoming more authentic with who I was. I started, unlayering some of my masks that I put on over the years, right? All those things that I became in order to be accepted, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because
That was so good. There's so much that you said there that I just want to snap my fingers a little bit.
Mm.
So, first and foremost, for the listeners, if you could define what heart intelligence is in a couple of sentences, what would you say heart intelligence is?
That's beautiful. I love that question because it's such a simple question. The answer is so simple yet so complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it's simple is because we all do it. We all do it so many times. We're just not conscious of it. And it's also hard because to some extent we forgot how to do it. So we
Yeah.
tend to do other things that take us away from our heart. Okay, let me say it this way. Think of a moment when you were, sitting in front of your partner, your loved one, and you were deeply looking in their eyes.
Mm.
And there was that moment of no talking, pure connection. Just this moment of inside of you, you feel completely inside of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
100% inside of yourself. That is you being in your heart.
Mm.
That's one example. We all give examples of, and there's a lot of talk about this, being in flow.
Yes.
And when we talk about being in flow, we always talk about being in flow with something that you're doing. I always say that being in your heart is being in flow with yourself,
Mm.
right? So having you being completely aligned with yourself, with a complete knowing of who you are, of how, I was going to say, let me say it this way, of how expansive you are, because we are truly limitless. The only
Mm.
thing limiting us in our heart, we are completely limitless. The only thing that's limiting us is our minds,
Yes.
our conditioning, and based on our conditioning, what we believe now to be possible for us.
Yes.
I always say this, that anything is possible as long as you believe it's possible for you. So being in your heart is where you know that everything is possible for you.
Mm.
That's
That.
the simplest way I can attempt to say it.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I
Mm,
loved everything you said about making decisions, right? People get
mm,
so stuck ruminating. Should I do A? Should I do B? Should I do C? Maybe D. And you keep going back and forth. I have that issue. I get so stuck on, am I making the right decision? I'm so scared of making the wrong decision because
yes,
I just don't want to go down the wrong path. So
yes.
I overthink and I overthink and I overthink. But I'm also someone who's really big on intuition. And even though I haven't listened to my intuition a lot of times, it's still pretty strong. So I'm very thankful for that. And exactly what you said about heart intelligence is when I know, I know. It's kind of like a peaceful knowing, but
Mm,
it's so strong at the same time. And although it might seem crazy, you just know that this is the direction you need to go. And
yeah.
every single time, like you said, I've made a decision leaning into my intuition, leaning into my heart space. I've never looked back and thought, did I make the right decision? And
Mhm,
things have always just worked out so perfectly for me when I listen to that voice. But what a
mhm,
lot of people struggle with is, how do we get from the mind, our conditioning, all of that, and how do we drop down into our heart? Because
mhm,
something else that I've noticed is, when I need to make a decision,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm clawing for it, and I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna sit
Mm-hmm.
and try to, ground myself into my heart. The answer doesn't come right away. So then my mind picks back up and it's like, oh my God, you're not getting an answer. So let's try to figure it out because we
Mm-hmm.
need to make it's crunch time. So I know that was a lot there. My question in all of that is, how do we get from the mind into the heart, and how do we handle when we're not getting that answer right away from our heart space when we need to make a decision?
I love that question. I love it because there's so much to unpack there.
Yes.
So let me say it this way. The question was, how do we get from our mind to our heart? I would challenge your listeners, and say and ask, is it possible, at all possible, that you are in your heart all the time, and that you have all these layers that you have put on top of your heart, and now you cannot hear your heart anymore because they are in the way? Is it at all possible? I found that that is the case. Like all these layers, all this mask, all this conditioning and all of that, they are on top of our heart's voice. And for that reason, we cannot hear it. So why is that? Why do we have all these things? Well, there are two primary, and I'm going to go a little bit of a detour here, but I think it's good to understand the context, because once we remove this layer, you'll see how easy it is to connect with our hearts. So we have two primary questions that we constantly and unconsciously ask ourselves. And these two are evolutionary questions. So we have, as a humanity, as a human species, we have evolved to always ask ourselves this question, these two questions. Number one is, am I safe? That is the basic question. Am I safe? In every situation, we always unconsciously and constantly ask ourselves, am I okay? Am I going to be okay in this situation, right? Second question is, if you want to put hierarchically, it's like the very next one, but they're tied together. Second question is, do I belong? Right? Am I safe, and do I belong? So why are they tied? Because if I don't belong, if I feel like I don't belong, then automatically I'm not safe. Right? So now I have to do something. I have to do, not, as opposed to being, I have to do something in order to get to a state of safety. And so, like, let's look in the old days, right? When, we lived in the wild, and where did this come from, right? Well, first of all, it was safer to assume it was, like if you pass by a bush that was there was some motion in there, it was safer for you to assume that it was a lion or some animal and not get eaten, right? Than to assume it's a rabbit and then, get eaten, right? So thinking of that example as a container, we are literally the descendants of all the people who have assumed the worst, because they are the ones that survived, right? So now this question of, am I safe, is ingrained in us. And second one is, how do we reach safety? Well, even from back then, we reach safety through numbers, through belonging to a social group, right? So what would happen if you're in a social group, you're safe. However, if you're not in a social group, if you're expelled in some way, then you're not safe, okay? So we have also learned, because of these two reasons, these two questions, we have also learned to have this lens through which we see life, the lens of right and wrong, good or bad, okay? So, for example, if you're back then in a social group, and let's say that you were wrong many times, well, eventually you will be kind of marginalized or even thrown out of the group, right? Because the survival of the group, of the social group, would be dependent on you being right. If you are right, then you would be elevated in status and could even become the leader of the group, right? Now, fast forward to today. This is still happening. Like, think the corporate world. You get hired in a company, you're allowed to make a certain amount of mistakes. If you make the wrong choices, right, the wrong choices, eventually, if you make enough, then eventually you're going to get fired. you're going to be thrown out of the social group. You're not going to belong anymore. However, if you make enough good choices and decisions, then you're going to be elevated. It could even become the CEO, right? So it's rewarded. So now we've learned to look at life through this lens. So I always say, in my personal life, I have completely removed this lens. I'm never looking at anything through the lens, even making decisions or anything in life, never looking at life through, is it right or is it wrong? I always look through the lens of, is it empowering or is it disempowering? Is it inspiring or uninspiring, right? So for example, making a decision, is this choice that I'm going to make now, is it going to empower me? Am I going to feel empowered and inspired? Is it going to create empowerment in down the line for me? Is it going to inspire other people, right? So I always make this decisions this way. And so knowing this, that we have these two driving questions, now we know, where do we come from, right? What is that driving energy behind our decision making? So every time you want to make a decision and you wonder to yourself, was this the right decision, or is this going to be the right decision? Well, who is it going to be right for? Is it going to be for certain people that if I make the wrong decision, then they're not going to love me anymore, they're not going to accept me anymore? Or is it right or empowering or inspiring for me? Because every time we make a decision from our mind, it's always because we want to be accepted. We want to be loved. We want to be, honored in some way, right? Because our survival depends on that, right? And so this is the first layer that I would remove. And this is a thick one. This is a thick layer that if you remove this one, then what you're left with is actually your heart, really. Like, remove this layer of the mind and ask yourself, okay, me making a decision right now, what would feel good for me? Forget about everyone else, everything else. What would feel good for me right now? And listen. A lot of times, you're making the point that a lot, we listen, but then nothing comes, and we go back to the mind. Yes, we've been, it's kind of an automatic process. But spend some time, allow yourself to listen, have patience with yourself. And what for me at least, and a lot of people that I know as well, that I work with, the answer is almost immediate, right? It's almost immediate. It's clear. It's loud. It's not like a complicated, oh yes, this and that. No, it's like one word, and that's what it is. If I don't find myself receiving that answer, then yes, clearly I'm going back into my mind, because I need to strategize, I need to find a solution and all of that. All I have to do, or what I do, is I change my state, right? So a lot of times, there are many things that are, I would say, make up being in your heart. It's the philosophy that you have, right? Basically your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings, your way of looking at life. It's the state that you're in, your physical body, the state that you're in. All of those contribute to you being in your heart. So if, let's say, I cannot, I don't know, I hate using this word, but if I cannot will myself to be in my heart, right? If I, that means I have to change my state. So then I do a practice that changes my state. And, that's different for everyone. I would actually say that's different from between, masculine energy, like, let's say, men, but again, I don't want to say men or women, but more masculine energy, and then also more feminine energies, right? There are different ways to get into your heart, depending on what's your dominant energy. And then, just, it's a matter of finding a practice that changes your state, that's aligned with you.
Wow, Cris, that was really good. The part where you said we are the descendants of all the people that thought the worst,
Yes.
that just like shifted me, like brought me into a new way of thinking, and like I feel like I entered a new like like I had a paradigm shift, literally, because I'm like, oh my god, yes, it's ingrained in us. I mean, you hear people say it in so many different ways, like back, when thousands and thousands of years ago. We had to survive, so we're prone to anxiety. And nowadays, we kind of still have that anxiety for things that we shouldn't be having anxiety for. But the way you said it just kind of clicked a little bit more for me, that we are the descendants of people who thought the worst because that was a survival mechanism. Whereas now, present day, I would say that thinking the worst is actually counterintuitive now, because it's no longer for survival. If anything, we're self-sabotaging. So one thing I do want to say, to touch on the part where you say that if you find yourself not getting that answer, and like, changing your state so that you can get into your heart space, I think that's incredibly important what you just said, because I noticed that when I'm not getting an answer, the best thing for me to do is to not be attached to the outcome of whatever decision that I need to make. So as soon as I lose the sense of attachment to how it's supposed to be, and like you said, not thinking in binary terms, like, is this good? Is this bad? Right or wrong? And I just kind of release whatever the outcome is supposed to be and trust, I immediately get the answer, or it comes to me when I'm no longer thinking about it or trying to force an answer to come or figure out what the right decision is. So everything that you said, and the questions that you said, am I safe and do I belong? That is so huge. I definitely make a lot of decisions that haven't served me in the past have been through that lens. And so many of us do it and we're not conscious of it. So I think, posing those two questions for people to think about, I'm sure the listeners can relate, like, oh, wow, this is what I was doing. And I didn't realize that, right? Because it takes a lot of courage to be your authentic self. And we're all kind of programmed the same way. So we're programmed to, have certain expectations. And when you're going against the grain, it's very scary, right? Because you don't get that love, you don't get that acceptance, and you feel unsafe, and you feel disempowered, and you feel like you don't have anybody to lean on. But just like you said, is this empowering for me? Does this align for me? Is the question that we need to shift into, rather than, am I safe? Or like, do I belong? So that was really, really good. Like that was so good.
Yeah, but even what you just pointed out, it's so powerful, because we have been, again, it's conditioning. It's conditioning.
Yes,
It's evolutionary conditioning to assume. We've learned to believe this lie about ourselves, and then we're trying. So we believe the lie, and then we're trying to fix something. We fix the lie to turn it into something different, right? And the lie is that we are not loved. That's the lie. Or that, and if I am not loved, right, then that means that I have to go outside of myself to receive that love, right? So it's almost like I'm all of a sudden I'm born and I have a void inside of me, and that void can only be filled by others outside of me.
Yeah.
That cannot, if you do that, then yes, you are going to be always in your mind, always strategizing, always looking for people who can fill the void, and contort yourself in so many ways to fit whatever image that they will accept of you, just so that you can feel their love. That's the big lie. But I would say you are already full, you're already love, you are all of that. It's just that you didn't know it. But you are all of that.
Yeah.
And how empowering is that? To know that you are all of that, and that you don't need to go and fill your cup from outside, from someone else, right? Like, how would it be, like, for me, I'm with my wife, to say, oh, I'm not feeling loved. Can you do something to make me feel loved? Versus, and then of course she'll come the same way and come with her empty cup and say, well, you know what, I'm not really feeling loved by you either, so why don't you do something for me as well, right? How empowering is that relationship? I would say not at all, right? And by the way, we were there. We were there. Where we are now is that we are realizing that all of that is already inside of us. So instead of going to each other and to other people to get this reassurance that we are okay, that we do belong, that we are loved, and all of that, we go into ourselves, right? We do connect with our heart, and we do go into ourselves, and it's a simple process of remembering. It's a reminder. That's all that is. Yeah. Remember that, yes, I am all of that. and I fill myself up. Now I have my own full cup filled from the inside. Now, what's the most important thing is that when I give, I don't give anymore. When I give love, I mean, I don't give love from an empty or a depleted cup, right? Where I only have in my mind, I only have a little bit, my assumption, I only have a little bit. I'm going to give you whatever I have. And now I'm even more empty. No, I'm going to give from an overflowing cup because it's always filling up and it's overflowing. And from there, I just give love.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
I always I came to this realization. I mean, yes, it's different with partners, but it's more appropriate, I guess, with other people.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I feel love for people, right?
Yeah.
Just people in general. I just feel love, and my instinct is to say I love you, right? Like, of course, it can be different types of love. I have my
Yeah, of
romantic love
course.
with my wife, but a friendship love with other people, right? And my instinct is, because that's what I've learned, is to
Yeah.
say, I love you, right? And it's almost to say what I'm actually saying is that something that you are doing made me feel love.
Mm-hmm.
But what actually happened, or the reason that I've come to, is that they didn't do anything. All I did was fill myself up, and I'm inside of me. I am feeling so much love that this person happens to be there. So my love flows towards that person as well.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, yeah, I feel love, but they didn't do anything to fill me up. Everything comes from inside of us
Yes.
because we already have that. We already are that, but we forget.
Yeah.
We believe the lie.
we
Yeah.
we believe the lie, we eat up the lie, we dream about the lie all the time.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really empowering to just feel like you have all the love within you. It's easier to be in your heart when you are okay with who you are and you feel full within yourself. I have a question for you though. There's so many people out there who live in their quote unquote authentic truth, and they make decisions for themselves, but many people think that, okay, they're being selfish or they're being narcissistic or they're being a-holes, right? And I think for somebody like me, I would say that that's what scares me sometimes, because I'm like, well, I should be making decisions for myself and, staying in my power and, staying in my heart. But like, for example, like, what if I'm with my partner and what aligns for myself is goes completely against what they want for themselves, but we're building a life together, right? But so I'm always thinking like, well, I need to take the people in my life into some sort of consideration while making decisions, because I don't want to come off selfish or self-centered. Do you ever get questions like that, or when you work with clients who might struggle with trying to find the balance between standing in their authentic truth and listening to their heart versus like, I just want to make sure that I'm not being a jerk or putting myself first in a way that's really selfish?
Mm. Yes, absolutely. And that is a great, again, I would say misconception.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, it's about, again, authenticity. You brought up the point of authenticity, and it's a great, great point, because a lot of, I mean, look in the personal development world, everyone talks about authenticity, being authentic, and, but two things here, just the authenticity part. Number one is, what is authenticity, right? Like, who defines authenticity? Is the definition some kind of an external source, right? Or is the authenticity something that is fully true to you? That's number one. Number two is, for example, let's say that I've had a hard day at work, and I come home, and my kids come to me and say, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy, let's play, and very high energy, but I'm depleted. At that moment, I'm just depleted, and I haven't had any time for myself to kind of recharge. So I get triggered, right? And I get triggered. I go into my nervous system, and I react. I explode, right? Let's say I call it anger, or they do something that makes me upset, so I feel angry now. Is me expressing my anger, I could say, well, that's authentic because I'm feeling that, and that's authentic. However, I take it a step further and I ask, Yes, it may be authentic, sure, but is it honest? Is it honest? Because authenticity, to me, is this layer that we have created on top of our honesty to almost bridge, as a buffer, to almost bridge our fear to be completely honest. Okay, so the honest thing for me to do in that moment would be, hey, look, I would love to play with you right now. I need a little bit of time for myself, and as soon as I am, back to myself, I will come and play with you. That would be the honest thing, right? Authentically would be, I'm going to scream or I'm going to do something. So now coming back to the partner context, who said that, once you come into a relationship with a partner, you have to be fully aligned on everything 100%? You come there, each partner is a beautiful individual on their own, and you come together. I mean, the people come together to share a life, to share beautiful moments, not to become one or the other, not for you to become like your partner or your partner to become like you, or just one. Everyone has their own individuality. So there are many examples I could bring from my wife and myself, where I would feel like, well, no, look, I would like to do this, and I know that this, whatever I wanted to do, is not really aligned with what you want to do. Okay, that's fine. Is there in the unknown future, is there any possibility, in the infinite possibilities, is there one where we can both do exactly what we want, what is honest for ourselves, and still connect and still be in love and still have a beautiful and create a beautiful relationship, right? Again, to me, it's about honoring yourself, and also from that place of honoring yourself, honoring the other person, right? It's to me, it's simple.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think I love what you said about the whole authenticity part versus, being honest. And I
Mm-hmm.
think you're right. Who defines authenticity, first of all, and second of all, being your most authentic self, you know, going into rage, like you said, is not really, you have to distinguish when should I be truly my authentic self or just be honest. And being honest is still being your authentic self, but regulating your emotions a little bit and expressing the truth to the person that you care about. This is why I'm feeling this way and I can't participate or do what you need me to do, which I really loved. I think that's a great way of looking at it. And in partnerships, I also personally believe that if you're working in the heart, I don't think the heart necessarily is working to cause or give you things to do that's going to cause issues in your life, right? It's all about alignment and what works for you. And I think if you're with the right partner, there are going to be moments where you're not aligned, but like you said, like that compromise where it isn't in the future, does this still make sense for the both of us, right? And whatever that might look like for the partners or other loved ones in whatever relationship that you might have with them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel like honesty mitigates the conversation, the communication
Yes.
between, like, okay, what am I actually trying to communicate here in the most honest way, right? Not in a way where, well, I'm just going to tell you what I think and that's my opinion and you take it or leave it kind of thing, right? That would be, I don't know, a version of authenticity, maybe, kind of like a opaque version of authenticity, but it would not be honest, because honestly, right, what I would want is to show up in a, be the best husband that I can possibly be, be kind and loving. So is there a way for me to communicate my non-alignment, let's say, or in a way where I say something like, hey, look, I see you, I see what you are, where you're coming from, I see where you want to go. I cannot promise you that I am fully aligned with what you're saying, but you know what? I love you, so I'm going to support you, right? I mean, it's just a different way of communicating.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think um again, the whole being authentic, but I think what you're really driving home is that honest authenticity, which comes from a place of love and just really learning to communicate, because communication is a big part of our relationships. And if you're living an authentic life that's causing chaos everywhere you go, is that really an authentic life, and is that really for your best interest and as empowering as you think it is?
Yeah.
So I think that was such a amazing point.
Mhm.
So if I were to come to you as a client, and I'm like, Cris, I'm really working to connect with my heart. I'm really working to build better relationships with
Mhm.
other people, with myself. um how would you work with me? Like, do you have a plan for a standard plan for everyone, or does it depend on the client that you're working with? How
Mhm.
would that process work?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And so I do have I would say a format, right? There are certain pillars that of heart Q, of heart intelligence, right? That we've come up with to kind of support the facilitation, right? And just really quickly, because we do have a program that's an online program. It can also be run as a cohort, and also the one-to-one coaching. But basically, the pillars of heart intelligence is of heart Q is basically, first, number one is the awareness, right? It's basically taking that flashlight of awareness and shining it on all the areas of your life, on your thoughts, your emotions, what we call the unconscious matrix. Okay. And the reason for that is to show, for you to realize what you have been conditioned to be, but you're not. You're not all those things, but you've just been conditioned. You just believe those things. Okay, that's fine. Perfect. Now that you know all of that, then stage number two is basically to express, like, how does that feel for you? Okay, and then just express that feeling. Once you've released and you've expressed all the anything that comes up with your realizations, then we can finally move into the heart. So we do have a process where we take you into the heart. It's very feeling based. Okay, so we take you into the heart, and from that space we go through processes of having you realize who you are, like really who you are at the core, and your authentic version, but your honest authentic version. Okay, and now that so now you know who you're not. Okay, now you know who you are. Amazing. Now what are you going to create? What are you going to create in your life, right? So we go through processes of taking heart aligned action. This is what we call heart aligned action, right? To create a life that is more aligned with yourself, with what you want to create in your life. So this is the basic structure. Now, when I work with clients one to one, we're all very unique individuals. So depending on what they need to work on, what is the most important thing in their life, then I customize it, right? My, I always say, yes, I have this structure, right? But I work very intuitively, right? So I feel into people. I always look to see beyond what you tell me, what is actually behind that, right? So I always probe a lot deeper. So I work very intuitively. And yeah, we take people through this process, and to get them into the heart. And our goal, my goal as working with clients, is for them to create a lifestyle, that sustains being in your heart. Because here's the thing, here's another misconception, and we've heard this quite a few times. People come to us and say, oh, well, it's easy for you because you're a heart consciousness coach, and this is what you do, and you probably live in your heart all the time, and all these things. And I'm like, no, no. Heart Q lifestyle is not about being in your heart all the time. That would not literally not be humanly possible, because you also have a heart, you also have a brain, and all these systems that make you as a human being, and all of them are beneficial for you to live a full life in this life. So it's not about being in your heart all the time. I'm not in my heart all the time, but I built a lifestyle, meaning a set of thoughts, premises, right? Presuppositions, tools, habits, all these things that support me always coming back to my heart, right? So this is also we always differentiate between resilience, right, and heart resilience. Resilience, for example, is that when you fall down, you get up and you keep going. It's like a bulldozer, right? You fall down, no problem. Get up, keep going. That's resilience. Heart resilience is you fall down, come back to yourself. Fall down again, come back to yourself. Come back to your heart and say, okay, what inside of me created me to trip down and fall? Because it's not the outside world. It's not the resources that you don't have or that you are in limited amount. It's not the outside world that limits you. It's your inner world, right? So I always say, it's not your resources, but it's your resourcefulness. So it's always about coming back to yourself, right? So anyway, we help clients to build those habits in order to create a lifestyle around always coming back to their heart, always coming back to their heart. So that's in a nutshell, basically.
That's beautiful. I love what you said. Heart intelligence is, falling down, but coming back to yourself. I love that. This has been a wonderful conversation, Cris. So insightful. One thing I do with all of my guests before we sign off is always ask for final words of wisdom, since this is called A Word to the Wise. It could be related to everything that we've been talking about or something completely different that you kind of keep in your back pocket as you go through life.
That's a beautiful question. I love ending on that note. I would say that in your journey, or in anyone's journey, two things. Always ask yourself, where am I coming from? Am I coming from my heart? Am I coming from my mind? And my mind means, from the survival pathway, right? Am I trying to be safe here? Am I trying to belong? Am I trying to please someone? Or is it really from this overflowing state, right? And the way you know that is the way you're coming from your heart is that, well, if you're coming from your mind, you feel contracted, you feel stressed. But if you come from your heart, you feel open, you feel expanded, right? You can actually feel it in your body. And so ask that question, like, where am I coming from, right? Am I coming from anger, or am I coming from compassion, right? So that's number one. Number two is, we're imperfect beings, and we are always trying to become better. And we are perfectly imperfect. So in our journey to become better, to become more expansive, in our journey back into ourselves, we're going to trip and we're going to fall. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. Just have compassion for yourself. Because when you start having compassion towards yourself, you start having compassion towards others. Whatever you put into yourself, whether it's thoughts, feelings, experiences, states, whatever you put into yourself is what you are going to fill yourself up with and then overflow. So therefore, whatever you put yourself inside yourself, you give to others as well.
That was really good. I love that so much. Thank you, Cris. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about you or work with you?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So we made it really simple. We have our website, heartq.com, just one word, heartq.com. And on there, we have our program, ways to connect with us. We have ways to become members of our private group, work with us one-to-one, our social media, everything is on there. So heartq.com is a one-stop shop where they can find us.
Awesome. Thank you for stopping by the show. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. Thank you.